To put things in perspective that's going to allow you to deal with this experience, this very short experience, is going to go by so fast. You're going to turn around tomorrow and go, it's the middle of May, where's my time abroad? I get these messages from time to time from people 3 or 4 months after the semester's ended, and it's, I want to be in Prague, please let me come back. So short experience, you've got to get your tools honed if you're really going to benefit from it. The first thing we have to do is come to terms with the whole question of culture. What's culture? If you talk to an anthropologist, you're going to get one answer. If you talk to a social psychologist, another. Somebody who's in literature, especially if they're postmodernist, you're going to get a different one. And really what we need is a working definition that we can apply to the experience that you're going to have. And for that purposes, my favorite definition has been attributed to Mark Twain. I don't know if it's really his or not, but it certainly sounds like him. It goes, culture is the way we do things around here. Now that's a little bit glib. It's pointing some fingers, but it really does capture the essence, the practical working essence of what culture it is. First of all, it's things that we do. It's the practices that we have, an anthropologist might say. Secondly, it's the way we do those things. How you come out of a shop, or probably for your purposes more importantly, how you go into a shop in the Czech Republic has some important differences from how you go into a shop in the States. Most especially, it is traditional going into a shop in the Czech Republic to give the right of way to the person who's coming out of the shop. So if you're stepping in and the door opens, or you open the door and you see someone, you step back and you let them come out. Why? Because typically people coming out are likely to have packages and people coming in may not, and so that custom has developed over the years. Now there are more and more automatic doors in shopping centers and stuff. It's probably dying out to a certain extent, but that's one of those things that indicates a difference in the way we do what we do, even though we're essentially doing the same kind of thing. And then finally, the notion of around here. I like that a lot because you can't limit culture in the way that some people might try. Culture isn't about nationality. It's not about geography. It's not about religion or language. It's all of those things and many more woven together into a fabric that becomes the basis for the way people live their lives. And you can have, as I'm sure all of you know, a culture of Yale and a culture of Michigan and a culture, excuse me, of UCLA and the culture of all of these places. You can have cultures of business. The culture of IBM is very different from the culture of Apple. That's because in the domain where these things operate, whether it's geographical, as it may be with, say, UCLA. UCLA is in a single place, and that culture is probably going to dominate there and not Berkeley or someplace like that. But if it's Apple versus IBM, Apple and IBM both have offices all around the world, and you're going to find an Apple-ish office in Paris that is Apple, and an IBM-ish office in Paris that's going to be Apple. That's going to be IBM, and they will be very, very different creatures. So when we talk about culture, we're talking quite literally about the way people do things in a way that unifies them to a certain extent, that gives them guides for behaving and tells them how to live their lives, or may. Now, probably the most important single characteristic of culture is the distinction between high context and low context cultures. In a high context culture, there are lots of rules and protocols and traditions about the way we do things and how we do things around here. Asian cultures, African cultures, most tribal cultures have a high degree of um, definition about the things that their members do and how they do them. Low context cultures, American, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, the new nations as they're sometimes called by political scientists. Many fewer and sometimes, at least in the eyes of those who have a higher context culture, nothing at all. How do you get on in this culture? Some of my Japanese students who came to Monterey would say, I don't see how it works. I don't see that there's a there. My words, not theirs. Because they are accustomed to a very, very closely knit set of practices and expect to find them, and coming to the United States they don't. You're moving in the other direction. If we put the United States and Canada and them around 10 or 15, that may be a little extreme, and the Japanese and say Chinese up around 95, Europe and the Czech Republic are probably in the 65 range. They are less high context than many, but obviously much more high context than Americans, Canadians, and so forth. So the adjustment you're going to be making is learning over the course of the time you're here that there are ways of doing things, like whether or not you step aside for somebody coming out of the shop. And there are things that you don't do. I'm always interested to watch what goes on in tram behavior around the world because tram behavior reveals a lot about a culture. It's amazing how quiet the trams and metros are in Prague. Some of that goes back to communism. I lived here under communism. Excuse me. People didn't talk because they didn't want to be overheard. The danger of someone hearing something they preferred or realize after the fact that they shouldn't have said. And that just spills over into the contemporary scene where if someone's talking on a tram or a metro, they're probably a tourist. Especially the Italians, the Spaniards, sometimes the French, not so much, where, in a Latin culture, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of that kind of communication going on. And the Romas, the Gypsies, who have a culture entirely their own and are unfairly discriminated against because of that. Now, you're going to be dealing with the fact that there is a fairly dramatic difference between the culture you come from and the culture that you've come to. And that difference is ultimately going to require you, with some important qualifications, require you to pay more attention to what's going on if you want to do this right. I mean, you can beer your way through this experience, you can get through this experience in a whole variety of ways. But if you really want to benefit from this year, this semester, if you really want to go away with the things that that present themselves to you, that offer themselves to you, you're going to need to get your antenna out. So that when you walk out that door in the morning, it's not just breathing it all in and taking it all in, but also going, what is going on here? What may there be that I don't see because I'm not Czech? What may there be, little subtleties, little nuances that completely get by me because I'm an American? And Americans tend to deal sort of in broad stroke, whereas Czechs tend to be at a much lower volume, much more self-effacing, much more minimalistic in their style. So what you need to do is, as I said, go out with a sense that what you are encountering has an infinity of nuances. What can you draw from all of those nuances that allow you to begin to put together a picture And then can you step into that reality? That's the real key. If you can start in subtle little ways, it may be how you walk, it may be how you smile. Can you be check? Not can you become check. Checks will tell you no one can become a check. Um, but can you begin to adopt and assimilate to some of the ways of behavior, or some of the practices that go on in the lives of the daily lives of checks?